He was broke and pathetic. We covered everything. That's what my father said about my dead uncle 20 minutes into the reception, with my uncle's casket still warm in the ground. Cousins laughed. My mother poured more wine. For 28 years, the woman I called my mother had been keeping me away from the man who was actually my father, my uncle, Theodore Halverson, by telling me, every Thanksgiving since I was old enough to walk, that he was a drunk, a failure, the family disappointment. He was not a drunk. He was not a failure. He had been quietly worth $115 million for the last decade. I knew. His lawyer had told me 2 days before he died. I did not say a word at that reception. I held my water glass. I waited. If this is already pulling you in, hit like and subscribe so the next chapter finds you. And drop your location and the local time in the comments below. I love knowing where in the world you're listening from. I'm Wilhelmina Vane, 28, a preschool teacher in Asheville, North Carolina, and this is the story of how my mother killed my real mother, and almost killed me too. Let's go back 4 weeks, to the morning my uncle died. The morning began the way Wednesdays always did at Mountain Meadows Preschool, with too much sticky juice, 3 crying toddlers, and 1 boy named Henry trying to put a plastic dinosaur up his nose. I was reading Goodnight Moon for the 2nd time when my phone vibrated against the rug. I didn't answer. Toddlers don't pause for phone calls. It vibrated again. Then a 3rd time. I looked at the screen. Bridget Calloway, my uncle's lawyer. She had never called me at work before. She had only ever called my mother, and only ever to ask, in her clipped professional tone, whether Theodore could borrow our trailer for the weekend. The answer was always no. I stepped into the hallway. Bridget? Wilhelmina, your uncle is asking for you. He has hours. I did not feel anything yet. That came later. I told my co-teacher I had a family emergency and walked out to the parking lot in a sleeveless cardigan in November. I forgot my coat. I forgot my purse. I had my keys. Driving down Merriman Avenue, my phone buzzed once more. Not Bridget this time. My mother. Don't make a scene at the hospice, sweetheart. Walter and I are already there. We're handling everything. Drive slowly. I read it twice. Handling everything. 3 months earlier, when my uncle's pancreatic cancer had returned, my mother had insisted she would handle the affairs because, she said, Teddy was never good with paperwork. My uncle had asked her to leave his cabin and never come back. She had laughed about it in the kitchen for a week. Now she was at his hospice. I drove faster. Mercy Hospice sat on a slope above the French Broad River, painted the soft gray of a hospital that wanted you to forget it was a hospital. I found my mother and Walter in the family lounge. Walter was reading a brochure about cremation pricing. My mother had a thin file open on her lap. Theodore's hospice intake papers. She was making notes in the margins with a pencil she had brought from home. There you are, she said brightly, the way she said it whenever I was the 3rd or 4th thought. He's been asking for you. He's not making sense, sweetheart. Don't take anything he says to heart. Walter looked up. Maybe he's leaving us his Camry, Viv. He laughed at his own joke. My mother shushed him without looking up. I walked past them into the room. My uncle's breathing was already wrong. Long, then short. Then the long pause that meant the long pause was almost the only thing left. His eyes opened when he heard the door. He saw me. His face changed. I took his hand. The hand that had taught me to skip stones at Lake Lure when I was 8. The hand that had once, when I was 12 and crying about a math test, pressed a small carved wooden owl into my palm and said, "Take this home. Don't tell your mother who gave it to you." "Mina," he whispered. "I'm here. Bridget knows. She'll tell you." I leaned closer. "Tell me what?" He swallowed. It took a long time. Then, with the last grip his hand had, "Don't let your mother near the photos. Don't trust them with the photos. Promise me." I promised. He closed his eyes. He died at 9:47 that evening. I stood beside the bed for a long moment with both my parents in the doorway. My mother stepped forward to take the small ring of cabin keys from the nightstand. "I'll handle the cabin, Mom." "Sweetheart, we always handle Teddy's things." "Not this time." My mother's hand stopped midair. She looked at me. Really looked. For the first time in maybe a year. The smile came back a half-second late. "Of course," she said. "Whenever you're ready." I took the keys. I walked out past Walter, who was already on the phone with the funeral home. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for 10 minutes before I could turn the engine on. When I finally opened the passenger door to set my purse down, I noticed it. A battered shoebox on the seat. I had not put it there. On the lid, in handwriting I had known my whole life. For Mina. The next morning, my mother had already called every florist in Buncombe County. I sat on the back steps of her house with a cup of cold coffee and listened to her through the screen door. "Make it cheap. Nobody important is coming." He was my brother-in-law, not a senator. "Yes, the carnations are fine. No, we don't need a spray for the casket. Whatever's on sale." She hung up. I heard her sigh. A satisfied sigh. The sigh of a woman who has cut a corner without anyone noticing. I tipped my coffee into the azalea bush. I did not want to drink anything she had brewed. That night, alone in my apartment above the bakery on Lexington Avenue, I sat on my bedroom floor with the shoebox in front of me. My uncle had owned almost nothing. A cabin, a Camry, a used drawing tablet, 3 flannel shirts, and apparently, this. I lifted the lid. The smell hit me first. Sandalwood, old paper, a trace of pipe smoke from a man I had never seen smoke a pipe. The box was full of black and white photographs. 40, maybe 50. None of them were of him. On the very top, a single photo, color, slightly faded. A man I recognized as my uncle, much younger, in a hospital corridor. He was holding a newborn. The newborn was wrapped in a pink hospital blanket with a date stamp at the bottom of the photo. March 1997. That month, that year, was my birth month. My birth year. But the man in the picture wasn't my father, and I had never seen this photo before in my life. I turned the picture over. In my uncle's handwriting, "First and last time I held you." I did not sleep. I drove to the funeral with the shoebox in the trunk under a folded blanket. About 25 people came. Most were my mother's church acquaintances, the kind of women who attend any funeral with a casserole regardless of who has died. 3 were Walter's golfing friends. 2 were neighbors who had known my uncle as the quiet man who waved from his cabin porch. Walter delivered the eulogy. He stood at the small podium in his navy suit, the one with the silver cufflinks my mother had picked out, and cleared his throat the way a man clears his throat before saying something he believes is wise. "Theodore was the brother who couldn't quite find his footing," he began. "Some men are born with maps. Theodore was not. He drifted. He drank. He owed money to people he should not have owed money to. But he was, in his own way, a sweet soul, and we loved him as best we could." I watched my mother in the front pew nod gently along, like a metronome agreeing with a wrong note. I remembered, suddenly and very clearly, a Thanksgiving from when I was 7. My uncle had come for dinner. He had brought a pumpkin pie. I had run to his lap to show him the drawing I had made of my classroom guinea pig. My mother had pulled me away by the wrist, knelt to my level, and whispered into my ear in the bright, kind voice she used in front of guests. "Don't sit on Uncle Teddy's lap, sweetheart. He smells like failure. Eat your pie at the table like a big girl." I had eaten my pie at the table. I had not climbed into anyone's lap again. When I came back to the present, my mother was looking at me from the front pew, studying, measuring. The reception was at our house, which is what my parents called my mother and Walter's 2-story colonial on Edgemont Road. 40 mourners crammed into the living room with paper plates of macaroni salad. Walter, 3 glasses of Pinot Grigio into the afternoon, held court near the fireplace. He was broke and pathetic. I heard him say, loudly, to a circle of his golfing friends. We covered everything: the cabin's roof, the Camry's transmission, the hospice, everything. He never lifted a finger to earn his own way. A cousin chuckled. My mother, refilling Walter's glass, did not contradict him. I left the room. I walked through the kitchen, out the back door, onto the wooden deck, and gripped the railing until my knuckles ached. The Blue Ridge Mountains sat heavy and gray on the horizon. Wilhelmina, I turned. Bridget Calloway was standing at the edge of the deck, gray suit, leather briefcase, a single pearl earring on each side. She had been at the funeral and at the reception, but she had not approached anyone, including me. Until now. Bridget, I am very sorry about your uncle. I know this is not the time, but your uncle left specific instructions regarding the timing of certain matters, and I am bound by them. Monday morning, 8:30, my office. Calloway and Madison, Pack Square. Come alone. How significant is what he left me? She considered me carefully before she answered. Significant enough to change every decision you will make for the rest of your life. The screen door banged open behind us. What are you two whispering about? My mother called, her voice pitched as light and sharp as a bird call. Just the paperwork for Uncle Teddy's cabin, I said, before Bridget could open her mouth. Bridget is helping me handle it. My mother smiled. How thoughtful of her. She walked over to us, put her hand around my elbow with practiced affection, and steered me 3 steps away from Bridget. Out of earshot, into the side yard, beside the rosemary bush. Mina, she said softly. I want you to understand something. Don't sign anything from Bridget without showing your father first. Teddy was confused at the end. Things may be messy. We don't want anyone taking advantage of you. Of course, Mom. She studied my face. I had been a child whose face she had read for 28 years. I had also, for 28 years, been a child who had learned, hour by hour, how to keep my face perfectly still in her presence. I kept it still. Good girl, she said. I drove home with the shoebox on the passenger seat. In my kitchen, I set the March 1997 photo on the counter. I turned it over. I read the back again. First and last time I held you. I stood at that counter looking at those 8 words for 4 hours. I did not cry. I did not eat. I waited for Monday. Calloway and Madison was a small firm in a brick row house on Pack Square, the kind of building tourists photographed without realizing what was inside. Bridget's office had a window overlooking the courthouse. She closed the door behind me and gestured to a leather chair. Wilhelmina, thank you for coming alone. You said it was significant. It is. Your uncle was, quietly and very deliberately, one of the wealthiest individuals in the state of North Carolina. He has been for the last 11 years. He chose to live the way he lived because it was the only way he could remain close to you without your parents removing him from your life entirely. I did not speak. She slid an envelope across the desk. His primary holdings, summarized, as of last Friday. I opened it. 1 page, 1 line that mattered. Total liquid assets. T. Halverson Capital, L.P. Beneficiary, Wilhelmina Vane. $115,427,303.21. My hands started to shake. I set the page down so they wouldn't show. I tried to find something to say. I could not. Take a breath, Wilhelmina. I took one. This is the financial portion. There is more. Your uncle instructed me to give you the rest only if you came alone, and only if you sat down. You are seated. You came alone. I am accordingly bound to give you the rest. She turned to her credenza, unlocked a small safe set into the cabinetry, and removed a manila envelope. Wax sealed. My name on the front, in my uncle's handwriting. She set it on the desk between us. She did not push it forward. Whenever you are ready. I was not ready. I picked it up anyway. I broke the wax with my thumbnail. The first page slid out cleanly. It was a laboratory report on cream-colored cardstock. LabCorp Charlotte. Dated August 14, 2013. 2 columns of numbers, 2 names at the top. Theodore J. Halverson, Wilhelmina Vane. Across the bottom, in italics, probability of paternity, 99.997%. I read it. I read it again. The numbers did not move. The names did not change. I looked up at Bridget. She did not look away. She did not offer reassurance. She gave me, instead, the most generous gift a lawyer can give a client in that moment. She let me arrive at the truth on my own time. He was my father. Yes. Then where is my mother? Bridget reached for a small leather folder. Her name was Thea Halverson. She was Vivienne's older sister by 3 years. She married your father in 1990. She was 31 years old when she gave birth to you at Mission Hospital, in the maternity ward, on March 15, 1997. I've never heard her name. No, you wouldn't have. What happened to her? Bridget took a long breath. She died 6 hours after you were born. The death certificate lists postpartum complications, with a subnote of accidental overdose of prescription painkillers. Your father did not believe it. He spent the next 28 years assembling evidence. He had proof, recorded on video, that the woman who has raised you for the entirety of your life murdered her own sister. The blood in my body went cold, the way water in a bucket goes cold when you stand it outside in February. Bridget watched me. She did not move to the laptop yet. She waited. Show it to me, I finally said. She turned her monitor toward me and clicked the file. The video began without preamble. An old man, gaunt, oxygen tube under his nose, sitting upright in a hospice bed. The camera was steady, propped, not handheld. Off-screen, my father's voice, calm and quiet. State your name, your former position, and the date for the record, please. Stuart Whitlock, former Deputy Clerk, Buncombe County Records Office, retired 1998. Today is August 24th, 2014. I am 66 years old. I have stage 4 lung cancer. I will be dead in a matter of weeks. A pause, a wet cough. I am making this statement freely. In March of 1997, a woman named Vivienne Vane came to my office with 2 items. Stuart looked directly at the lens. His eyes were yellow with liver failure, but they were clear. The first item was an envelope containing $25,000 in cash. The second item was a small amber prescription bottle of postpartum painkillers belonging to her sister, Thea Halverson. The blood in my body went a colder cold. I had not known there were grades. If you are still with me, and I hope you are, drop a comment with your prediction. What do you think Vivienne Vane said to that clerk in 1997? What does a woman ask a stranger to do when she has already decided to kill her sister and steal her baby? Because what came next made me rethink every Thanksgiving dinner of my life. Stuart Whitlock did not stop. The video ran on. Mrs. Vane requested 2 things of me. First, that I prepare a falsified birth certificate naming herself and her husband, Walter Vane, as the biological parents of a newborn female, born March 15, 1997, weight 6 pounds 11 ounces, location Mission Hospital, Asheville. Second, that I replace the contents of the prescription bottle she handed me, refilling it with a substance she had pre-mixed and brought in a separate vial. She told me, quote, "The pharmacy will never know. The hospital will never check." I did both things. I was paid in full. I have spent every year since regretting it, but I did not have the courage to come forward while I had a life to lose. I have nothing left to lose now. The video held on his face for a long moment. Then my father's voice again, gentle. "Thank you, Stuart." The video ended. I sat in Bridget's office for a full 30 seconds without breathing. Then I exhaled. I said the only thing I could think to say. "Bridget, I need to see my mother's medical chart." "He thought you would ask. He prepared for that." She unlocked the safe again. She took out a thick folder. She placed it in front of me. I opened it. Photocopies, yellowed at the edges, stamped Mission Hospital Maternity Unit, March 15th, 1997. Page 4 in the medical examiner's hand. Dosage inconsistent with prescription. Investigation recommended. Page 5, where the recommendation should have been formalized, was missing. Cleanly cut out, near the binding. Vivian worked in Missions Records Department from 1997 until 2002, Bridget said. She was the records clerk in charge of maternity intake. She destroyed the recommendation page from the original file. Your father obtained these copies by paying an orderly named Marcus DeYoung $300 in cash 1 week after your mother died. The orderly photocopied everything at a Kinko's on Tunnel Road and brought the copies to your father at the bus station. I touched the cut edge of the missing page. It was clean. Surgical. My phone buzzed on the desk. I looked. My mother. Sweetheart, family dinner Friday at 6. Bring the photos from Teddy's cabin. Your father wants to inventory them before we donate his things to Goodwill. Love you. Mom. I read it twice. Then I texted back. Of course, Mom, bringing them. Love you too. I set the phone face down on Bridget's desk. Bridget, I need a minute. I left the office and walked 3 blocks to my car. I drove south on Biltmore Avenue, past the brewery, past the Aston, until Mission Hospital rose on my left. I pulled into the visitor parking deck and parked on the 2nd level. I did not get out of the car. I sat with the engine off, watching nurses walk in and out of the lobby in their blue scrubs, eating granola bars and laughing at things on their phones. Somewhere on the 2nd floor of this building, 28 years ago, my mother had been alive for 6 hours after I had been alive for 6 hours, and then she had not been alive anymore. I had no memory of her face. I had not known her name until 90 minutes ago. I sat there for 20 minutes. I did not cry. I drove home. In my kitchen, I emptied the shoebox onto the counter and went through every photograph again. None of them, I now realized, was random. Every photo was of me, from a distance, from across a parking lot, from behind a bench at the Botanical Garden, from a parked car outside Mountain Meadows Preschool. Different ages. Same girl. Watched. I lifted the cardboard liner at the bottom of the shoebox. Underneath it sat a single envelope. White. Sealed. My name on the front in pen, not pencil. To Mina, when you know. I sat down on the kitchen floor because my legs decided for me. I broke the envelope with my thumb. Mina, if you are reading this, Bridget has told you. I'm sorry I had to leave it to her. There was no other way. The woman who has called herself your mother for 28 years killed your real mother, her own sister, to take you. Your real mother's name was Thea. She was the warmest human being I have ever known. She named you Wilhelmina because her grandmother in Glasgow had been a Wilhelmina, and she said the name sounded like a woman who would not be told what to do. I have never lied about loving you. I have lied about everything else for 28 years to stay alive long enough to make sure they paid. Bridget has the rest. Trust her. Do not trust anyone in that house. I love you. I have loved you since the day I held you in a mission hospital corridor at 3 a.m. while a nurse looked the other way. Dad. The word Dad, written in pen by a man who had been dead 11 days, was the first word I had ever read in my life that I was allowed to call my father. I sat on the kitchen floor for 2 hours. I did not cry. I did not pray. I read the letter 20 times until I had the rhythm of his sentences memorized. Then I folded it back into the envelope. I put the envelope into the inside pocket of my coat, where it would always be against my ribs. Then I called Bridget. I need everything. I was back in her office at 8 the next morning. She had already unlocked the larger safe in the back room before I arrived. She motioned me in. The safe was a closet, not a box. Shelves of file folders, color-coded, dated, indexed. She lifted them down one by one and set them on the conference table. Your original birth certificate, sealed by the Buncombe County Probate Court in 1999, after your father's first custody petition failed, We have a court-certified copy. Your name at birth, Wilhelmina Halverson, daughter of Theodore J. and Thea Halverson. She set the document in front of me. I touched the embossed seal with my fingertip. 12 letters your father wrote to you between 2005 and 2018, sent to your home address. Each one returned marked Return to Sender. Wrong address. The address was correct. Your mother intercepted them. She kept the unopened ones in a hatbox in her closet for years before your father's investigator photographed them through her bedroom window. A stack of unopened envelopes, 12 of them, in front of me, yellowed, all saying the same word at the top right corner, Mina. Your father purchased the mortgage on Walter's insurance agency in 2023 through a shell company called Whitberry Holdings. He owns it. As of his death, you own it. What does that mean? It means if Walter misses a payment, you can foreclose on his livelihood. She slid one more document toward me, a photograph of a handwritten note on hospital stationery, dated March 13, 1997, 2 days before I was born. In a tight, anxious cursive, Teddy, Vivian is looking at me strange. She keeps holding the baby and not giving her back. Tell me I am being a hormonal pregnant woman. Tell me I'm wrong. Thea. Beneath the note, Bridget set down a small brass safety deposit box key on a thin chain and a USB drive in a sealed evidence bag. He bought one more thing for you. He said to give you this on the day you decided what to do. I drove from her office to the SunTrust branch on Patton Avenue, 2 blocks from Walter's insurance agency. I had used the same branch since I was 16. I had a checking account with $2,000 in it. I had never once been in the back vault. The teller verified my key, took my ID, and walked me to box 1167. Square steel door. She unlocked it on her side. I unlocked it on mine. She left me alone in the small viewing room. Inside the box, a single accordion folder. The folder contained the original, not the photocopy, of my mother's hospital chart. All 23 pages, page 5 complete. The medical examiner's handwritten recommendation in full. Dosage of self-administered painkillers inconsistent with prescribed strength. Investigation into pharmacy-side substitution recommended. Forwarded to Mission Hospital Risk Management, VV. Vivian Vane. The recommendation had been forwarded straight back to the woman who had committed the act. Beside the folder, the USB drive Bridget had given me. I plugged it into my laptop in the car. Folder 1. 12 scanned letters, each marked with the date my father had mailed it, each opened and read aloud by him into an audio file. He had recorded himself reading them, in case I never met him in person. Folder 2. Photographs. My birthdays. My elementary school plays. My high school graduation. My first day at East Carolina University. Every one of them. My father in the background, 50 meters away, never closer. In one photo from my 10th birthday party at Pisgah View Park, he is standing across the path holding a small wrapped gift, watching me from behind a stranger's car, because my mother was standing next to me and he could not approach. I closed the laptop. I sat in the SunTrust parking lot for a long time. I drove back to Bridget's office. I did not call ahead. I walked in and asked her to call the police. Detective Mara Pelletier, she said, and was already dialing. Pelletier arrived in 45 minutes, mid-50s, heavy set in a careful, controlled way. Wore her gray hair short, wore a sidearm under her blazer like a woman who had stopped pretending it wasn't there in 1999. She had been a patrol officer in West Asheville during the years my mother had died. She remembered the case the moment Bridget said the name Thea Halverson. I responded to that hospital, she said quietly. Postpartum. I remember the husband. The brother-in-law, I should say. He kept saying his wife wouldn't have taken extra pills. He kept asking us to test the bottle. Nobody tested the bottle. I am sorry, Wilhelmina. She sat down at Bridget's conference table and read the file for 25 minutes. She did not interrupt herself. She did not ask questions. She read. When she finished, she set the last page down and looked up. This is enough to reopen. North Carolina has no statute of limitations on murder. I can have warrants drafted by end of business today. We can serve them anywhere. Her home, her workplace, her car. I can have her in a holding cell tonight if you ask me to. I want them served somewhere specific. Pelletier waited. My mother is organizing a memorial estate service for my father at St. Margaret's Church on December 20th, 11 in the morning. She has invited the Asheville Citizen-Times. She has invited her entire church social committee. She has invited my cousins from Charlotte. The purpose of the service, in her own words, is to set the record straight about my father's life. She is going to use his memorial to tell the entire community that he was a drunk and a failure who could not handle his gifts. I want her arrested in front of every single one of those people. Pelletier studied me for a long moment. Wilhelmina, that is a public arrest. With press. That is going to be a hard 90 seconds. Are you going to be able to stand at the front of a church while my officers walk your mother out in handcuffs? She is not my mother. All right, detective. Yes. Walter, the man I've called my father. Did he know about the pills, or only the certificate? Pelletier paged back through the file. The video doesn't mention him handling the bottle, just signing the forged certificate beside her. He may have believed the death was natural. He may not have. What I can tell you is that on December 20th at 11:09, depending on how the evidence falls, he may learn what his wife actually did at the same moment you watch her hear the charge. I thought about that. Good. Friday, December 12th, 6 p.m. exactly. I arrived at the house on Edgemont Road with the shoebox under my arm. I had removed exactly one item from it, my father's letter, and tucked it into my coat pocket against my ribs. My mother opened the door. She was in the navy cashmere sweater she wore for family nights. She kissed my cheek. She smelled like rose water and Chardonnay. Sweetheart, come in. Walter is grilling salmon. The shoebox went on the dining room table beside a bowl of clementines. My mother poured me a glass of wine I did not drink. She lifted the lid of the shoebox the way a woman opens a Christmas present she has been waiting for. Oh, Mina, look at all these. She was moving through the photographs quickly, too quickly to be sentimental. She was searching. She found it. The March 1997 photo. My uncle holding the newborn in pink in the mission corridor. Her fingers closed on it. She lifted it to the light. She turned it over. Her face did one thing, one small thing. The corner of her mouth tightened by about 2 millimeters. She held the photo for exactly 3 seconds. Then she slipped it into the pocket of her cardigan. Don't pretend you remember, Viv. Walter from the kitchen holding a spatula, oblivious. That's Teddy with some neighbor's kid. He used to babysit for the Halloways down the road. Of course, she said lightly, just sentimental. She did not put the photo back in the box. I noted that. We sat down to dinner. Salmon, rice pilaf, the salad my mother had made every Friday since I was 11. Walter talked about a customer who had tried to claim flood damage on a policy that excluded flooding. He laughed at his own outcome. My mother laughed at him laughing. I waited until the second glass of wine had loosened her shoulders. Mom, I said softly, was there anything unusual about when I was born? Her fork paused in midair. Just a half second. She set it down. What an odd question, sweetheart, why? Uncle Teddy left some baby photos in the box. There's one of him in a hospital corridor holding a baby in March 1997. I just wondered if he was there when I was born. Walter, helpfully unhelpful. She held you, she fed you, she nearly died of dehydration loving you. End of story. Drink your wine, Mina. My mother, recovering. Teddy was confused at the end of his life, sweetheart. He may have had photos that didn't make any sense. I wouldn't read into it. Mom! Yes? Was Uncle Teddy at the hospital when I was born? She smiled the smile she had been smiling at me since I was 3 years old. Warm, certain, totally unbothered. No, sweetheart, he wasn't. He was out of town. It was just your father and me. Just you and Dad? Yes. I finished my rice. When my mother got up to clear the plates, I picked up her used cloth napkin from her placemat and slid it into the inside pocket of my coat. Her saliva was on it. The DNA crime lab in Raleigh would be able to confirm her relationship to my biological mother in 12 days. I did not need the backup. I had it anyway. Dessert was a pecan pie my mother had bought at the fresh market and decanted onto her grandmother's china to make it look homemade. She served it with vanilla ice cream and a small announcement. I've made a decision about the memorial. We're going to hold a proper memorial estate service for Theodore at St. Margaret's, December 20th, 11 a.m. I've already spoken with Pastor Briggs. I've invited the Asheville Citizen-Times. Janine Holcomb will be covering it for the community section. The entire church social committee will be there. Your cousins are driving down from Charlotte. Walter beamed at her. She does these things beautifully. The purpose, sweetheart. She turned her attention to me, lightly, is to set the record straight about your uncle. People in this community heard things over the years that weren't true, about his finances, about his behavior. We owe him a proper telling of who he really was. I forced myself to wait 3 seconds before answering. Of course, Mom. What should I wear? The navy dress, the one with the boat neck. And Mina, please. No surprises. We need to present a united family in front of the community. Pastor Briggs has been hearing things and we need to put them to rest. Can you promise me that? I looked her in the eye. I gave her the smile she had taught me to give her over 28 years of holiday photographs. I promise, Mom. No surprises. She squeezed my hand. I drove home with both hands on the wheel. Halfway up Merriman, I pulled over, put the car in park, and dialed Bridget. December 20th. 11 a.m. St. Margaret's on Charlotte Street. The Citizen-Times will be there. 40 mourners, minimum. Pastor Briggs is preaching. Make it airtight. It will be airtight. Detective Pelletier has your warrants already drafted. We will be there at 9:30. Thank you, Bridget. Wilhelmina, you have permission to be afraid, just not in front of her. I never am. The week between dinner and the memorial was a long sequence of small, quiet drives. Detective Pelletier located Marcus DeYoung the same Saturday through Mission Hospital's pension office, which still kept addresses on retired orderlies. Marcus lived in Black Mountain, 15 miles east of Asheville, in a small green house with a chicken coop in the backyard. I drove out alone on Monday morning. I knocked on his door. He opened it. He was 72, white-haired, in suspenders and house slippers. When I introduced myself as Wilhelmina Halverson, daughter of Thea Halverson, he closed his eyes for a long moment. "Come in, ma'am." We sat at his kitchen table. He poured coffee from a percolator. He talked without me having to prompt him. Your mother was the cleanest patient on the floor that week. Most maternity patients, they leave the room a mess. They're exhausted, in pain. They don't care. Your mother kept her tray table organized, asked for crackers herself, held you the moment they brought you back from the bath. They wheeled her out at 3 in the morning. I was the one who helped lift her onto the gurney. She was still warm. He stopped. He drank his coffee. I told my supervisor the next day. I told her something was wrong with the dosage. The bottle on the table was a 30-milligram bottle, but the pills inside were 60. I could tell from the imprint. My supervisor, a woman, very put together, very kind voice. She told me to forget about it. She said I was a new orderly and I didn't want to make trouble. She gave me 3 days off. When I came back, the bottle was gone. Do you remember her name? Mrs. Vane, Vivian Vane. He set his coffee down. Ma'am, I've been waiting 28 years for someone to ask me about that night. I would like to give a statement. Pelletier recorded Marcus's statement the next day in the Asheville PD interview room. Marcus identified Vivian Vane in a photograph without hesitation. He identified Walter Vane. He testified, without prompting, that the supervisor who had warned him to stay quiet had been the same woman who later, in 1997, accepted the medical examiner's recommendation and quietly filed it away in the records department. By Thursday afternoon, Pelletier had 2 warrants signed by a magistrate. The first was for Walter Vane, identity fraud, and conspiracy to commit identity fraud, based on the falsified birth certificate. The second was for Vivian Vane, identity fraud, conspiracy to commit identity fraud, and second-degree murder of Thea Halverson. Pelletier called me from her cruiser at 5 p.m. Wilhelmina, the warrants are signed. I have a window. I can arrest her at the house tonight. Quiet. 2 officers. She'll be in holding before her wineglass cools. I sat at my kitchen table. I waited for 10 seconds. No, detective. You're sure? I'm sure. She has built her entire reputation in this town on her church work, on her social committee, on the appearance of being a good Christian woman who buried her sister with grace and raised her sister's daughter as her own. She does not get to be quietly arrested at home in Kashmir. Her community needs to see her face when the mask comes off. A long pause on the line. All right, Saturday, 11:09. I'll have 2 plainclothes by the side door. I'll be at the back of the sanctuary. If anything goes sideways, if anyone moves toward you, I'm on it in 2 seconds. Do you understand? Yes. Wilhelmina, get some sleep tonight. I did not. She called me at 9:30 Friday night. I had not eaten dinner. I had not turned on a single light in my apartment. I was sitting in the dark on the foot of my bed with my father's letter folded against my chest. I picked up on the second ring. Sweetheart, are you home? I'm home, Mom. I want to read you a passage from the eulogy I've written for your father. Walter, I mean. The eulogy Walter is delivering tomorrow. I want to make sure I have the tone right. May I? Of course. I closed my eyes. Theodore Halverson was a man who could not handle the gifts he had been given. Not his marriage, not his business, not his family's love. He drifted from one disappointment to the next. We loved him as best we could, even when he made it difficult. And tomorrow, we lay him to rest with the dignity he could not always grant himself. She paused, waiting. It's perfect, Mom. He would be proud. Oh, sweetheart, thank you. Get some rest. Wear the navy dress. I love you. I love you too, Mom. I hung up. I sat on the foot of the bed for an hour. I did not turn on the light. I let the dark hold me. I rehearsed the 8 words I was going to say at the front of that church. My mother's name was Thea Halverson. She was murdered. St. Margaret's Episcopal sat at the corner of Charlotte Street and Edwin Place, a small stone church with a single white steeple and a hand-lettered sign that read, Sunday Services. All are welcome. I arrived at 9:30 in the navy dress. I had not eaten breakfast. I had not cried. I had brushed my hair carefully because my mother would notice if I had not. Bridget was already inside, sitting in the last pew on the left, a brown leather duffel bag at her feet. Inside the duffel, a printed bound copy of every document: DNA test, original birth certificate, the cut hospital chart, the intact hospital chart, the 12 intercepted letters, Marcus de Young's signed statement, plus 2 USB drives, identical, each loaded with Stuart Whitlock's video. 1 primary, 1 backup. Pelletier was in the back of the sanctuary in a dark gray suit, looking like a churchgoer who had arrived early. 2 plainclothes officers stood near the side door behind the choir loft, holding folded programs. One was a woman. At 9:40, Pastor Briggs approached me in the aisle. He was a soft-spoken man in his early 60s who had baptized me at 4 and confirmed me at 14. Wilhelmina, your mother mentioned you might want to give brief remarks. Would you like the floor? Yes, Pastor, after my father reads his eulogy. May I take it directly? Of course, dear. He squeezed my hand and went to greet the next arriving mourner. Bridget caught my eye from the back. She nodded once. I sat in the front pew on the right and put my hands on my knees and waited. The first cars began arriving at 10:30. The church filled the way Southern churches always fill. Slowly at first, then in a single rush at 5 minutes till. By 10:55, 62 people were seated. Janine Holcomb from the Citizen-Times had taken the second-to-last pew and was already taking quiet notes. At 10:55 exactly, Walter and Vivienne arrived. Walter in a charcoal suit, gold tie. Vivienne in black satin with a pillbox hat she had bought at Belk on Wednesday afternoon. She walked down the center aisle like a woman walking down her own wedding aisle, accepting condolences left and right with practiced grief. She reached the front pew. She saw me. "There you are, sweetheart." She bent down. She kissed my cheek. Her perfume, rose water again, filled my nose. Her hand cupped the back of my head briefly, the way she had done it my whole life, when she wanted to demonstrate ownership without anyone seeing. She whispered, low, just for me, "You're a good girl, Mina. I'm proud of you for being here today." I turned my face up to hers. I kept my voice equally low. "I know what you did." Her pupils contracted by 1 full degree. Not the eyes, the pupils, the tiny black centers, narrowing the way a cat's narrow when it sees a movement in the grass. She smiled. The smile did not match the pupils. "What an odd thing to say, sweetheart. Sit in the front, please." "I'll stand." She held my gaze for 1 second too long. Then she turned and walked to her seat at the end of the front pew and arranged her skirt over her knees the way a woman arranges her skirt when she does not want anyone to see her hands shake. She glanced toward the back of the sanctuary. She saw Bridget. She saw Bridget's duffel bag. Something in her face, for the first time in 28 years, flickered. Pastor Briggs opened the service at 11:04. He read a brief passage from the Gospel of John about death and resurrection. He invited Walter forward. Walter stood at the pulpit. He cleared his throat. He unfolded the index cards my mother had typed for him the night before. Theodore Halverson was a man who could not handle the gifts he had been given. Not his marriage. Not his business. Not his family's. I stood up. I walked, slowly, deliberately, the length of the center aisle. The dress moved against my legs. 62 heads turned to watch me. I reached the front. I stopped 6 feet from Walter. I turned to face the congregation. I waited until the room was completely still. "Walter," I said quietly without looking at him, "please sit down. My father deserves a different eulogy." He blinked. He looked at Vivienne. Vivienne's mouth moved without sound. "Walter," Pastor Briggs said gently from his seat, "perhaps you should let Wilhelmina speak." Walter, robbed of his cue, walked back to his pew and sat down beside Vivienne. He did not look at her. I lifted my chin. I did not raise my voice. I have learned in 28 years that the things that destroy a room are never the loud things. My name is Wilhelmina. The man we are burying today was my father. My mother's name was Thea Halverson. She died at Mission Hospital on March 15, 1997, 6 hours after I was born. She did not die of postpartum complications, as her death certificate claims. She was murdered. I have proof. A small intake of breath spread across the sanctuary the way wind spreads across a wheat field. An elderly woman in the third pew whispered, "Oh dear Lord." Vivienne in the front pew did not move. She had stopped breathing. I nodded once to Bridget. She rose from the back pew with the duffel and walked, unhurried, to the small audiovisual console at the side of the sanctuary. The console my mother had rented for the morning to play a tasteful video tribute to my father's quiet life. Bridget removed Vivienne's tribute DVD. She inserted my USB drive. A blue projection screen, 4 meters wide, descended slowly from the rafters above the altar. The image bloomed onto it. Stuart Whitlock, oxygen tube, hospice bed, August 2014. His voice carried through the church's PA system, which was already wired for the tribute. Every pew heard him clearly. "I am Stuart Whitlock, former deputy clerk, Buncombe County Records Office. In March of 1997, a woman named Vivian Vane came to my office with $25,000 in cash and a small amber prescription bottle. She paid me to forge a birth certificate naming herself and her husband as the biological parents of a newborn female. She also paid me to replace the contents of the bottle. The bottle belonged to her sister, Thea Halverson. I did both things. Thea Halverson died 6 hours later. I have spent every year since regretting it. I am dying now, and I want it on record. The video held on his face. 62 people sat in absolute silence. A small child in the fourth pew coughed. Walter turned very slowly to look at Vivienne. Viv. His voice was a whisper. It carried in the silence anyway. Vivienne, pale, spoke through closed teeth. It's a lie. He was paid by Teddy. He was filmed in hospice while he was dying, I said quietly. My father held the camera. Stuart Whitlock died 11 days after filming and had nothing to spend money on. The full chain of custody is in Detective Pelletier's hands. Detective? From the back of the sanctuary, Detective Mara Pelletier began to walk down the center aisle. I lifted the DNA paternity report from the duffel Bridget had set at my feet. I walked, slowly, down the center aisle. I stopped at each pew. I held the report up so the people in that row could see the names and the percentage. Theodore Halverson was my biological father. My birth certificate is a forgery. The man who paid for the forgery is sitting in the first pew. I turned. Walter. Walter stood. His face was the color of paper. Mina, sweetheart, your uncle was a sick man. He was telling stories at the end. Stop calling him my uncle. The two words landed somewhere in his chest. He sat back down. The woman who killed my biological mother, I said, turning my gaze to Vivienne, is sitting next to him. Her name is Vivienne Vane. She is my biological aunt. She poisoned her own sister at Mission Hospital 28 years ago to take me. She is hiding it from Walter at this exact moment, who, until 12 seconds ago, did not know she had killed anyone. Walter made a small, low sound, like an animal that has just been struck. Detective Pelletier reached the front of the sanctuary. She stopped 2 feet from Walter. Walter Vane. You are under arrest for identity fraud and conspiracy to commit identity fraud in connection with the forged birth certificate of Wilhelmina Halverson, dated March 15, 1997. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. He did not resist. He simply lowered his head and held out his wrists like a man who had been waiting 28 years to be told what to do. The female plainclothes officer cuffed him. The second officer, the woman, mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, name plate said Esposito, moved to Vivienne. Vivienne had not stood. She remained seated, perfectly upright, hands folded in her lap, satin dress smooth. Vivienne Vane, you are under arrest for the second-degree murder of Thea Halverson on March 15, 1997, and for conspiracy to commit identity fraud. Please stand. She did not stand. She looked instead at me. The pupils were the same constricted points they had been when I had whispered to her 10 minutes earlier. The face was no longer trying to be my mother's face. She said loudly enough for the front 3 pews to hear clearly. Your real mother was weak, Wilhelmina. She would have ruined you. She was the kind of woman who cried over recipes. I gave you a life. I gave you a father who built you a college fund and a mother who put you in ballet class and a home that did not smell like sadness. You should be grateful. 62 people heard her say it. Janine Holcomb at the Citizen Times wrote it down verbatim in her notebook. Her hand was shaking. She did not stop writing. Walter, beside Vivienne, in handcuffs, turned his head and looked at his wife for the first time in what looked like a very long time. Viv, what did you do? I gave us a daughter, Walter. Vivienne, what did you do? She finally looked at him. Her eyes were dry. There was no apology in them. You wanted a daughter, Walter. We could not have one. So I got us one. Walter's face fell into a place I had not seen it go before. He saw for the first time the woman he had married. He had been married to her for 31 years. Officer Esposito lifted Vivian gently by the elbow. Vivian stood. The pillbox hat slid an inch further off-center. She did not adjust it. The cuffs went on. Janine wrote down the way the metal clicked. Vivian turned her face one final time toward me. I raised you, Wilhelmina. I bought your dresses. I taught you to read. I held you when you had nightmares. I waited up the night of your senior prom. Don't you dare. I cut her off without raising my voice. You raised me because you murdered my mother and could not have a daughter of your own. I was not a child to you. I was a trophy you stole at 3 a.m. in a hospital corridor while my real mother's body was still warm. I am not the gift you gave yourself, Vivienne. I am the evidence that you did it. The word Vivienne, the first time I had ever called her by her first name in my life, landed in her face like a slap. She did not respond. She had nothing to respond with. Officer Esposito walked her down the aisle. Vivienne did not look back. Pelletier walked Walter out behind her. He was crying. He was the only one crying. Pastor Briggs stood frozen at the podium with both hands flat on the wood, the way a man holds himself up when his knees have failed him. The congregation did not move. The Citizen Times reporter was still writing. The 4-meter projector screen had gone blue. I stood at the front of my father's funeral, in the navy dress my mother had chosen, in a church my mother had filled with her own audience, and felt, for the first time in 28 years, the size of the air in a room with no one watching me on her behalf. The heavy oak doors at the back of the sanctuary swung shut behind them. The latch caught. The church became, suddenly and completely, a room. 62 people sat in stunned silence. No one moved. No one breathed. I stood at the front for a long moment. Bridget had walked to the front and was standing one step behind me, close enough that I could feel her shoulder almost touching mine. She did not speak. I looked out at the faces. Some of them I had known since I was a child. The mother of my best friend from elementary school. The pediatrician who had given me my first vaccinations. The choir director who had told me I had a sweet alto when I was 13. My cousins from Charlotte. Pastor Briggs. Janine, still writing. I spoke softly, quiet enough that they had to lean forward to hear me. My father's name was Theodore Halverson. He spent the last 28 years of his life loving me from across parking lots, from behind cars, from the back rows of school plays, because he was not allowed to love me up close. He gave me, on his deathbed, the truth I had been denied since I was 6 hours old. That is the eulogy he deserved. Thank you for being here to witness it. A woman in the back pew began very quietly to weep. Bridget put her hand on my shoulder. I turned and walked, with her, down the aisle and out the doors that my mother had been walked through in handcuffs 90 seconds earlier. The Asheville winter air met me at the steps. I breathed it in. For the first time in 28 years, the air I was breathing was entirely my own. If you have ever lived your whole life trusting people who were lying to you about who you were, drop a comment below. I want to know I am not alone. Tell me what you would have done with that envelope, because boundaries are not built in a single morning. They are built the moment you decide whose voice you stop letting into your head. My father gave me the documents. I gave myself permission. 3 weeks later, on the second Monday of January, I drove back to the SunTrust branch on Patton Avenue. I signed a name change application with a notary on the second floor. The teller, a young woman with 2 ear piercings and a name tag that read Avery, ran the paperwork without looking up. "Congratulations, ma'am," she said, when she handed me the receipt. The receipt said, Wilhelmina Halverson. I drove from the bank uptown Mountain Road, past the overlooks, past the apple orchards, until the gravel turnoff for my father's cabin came up on the left. The cabin sat the way it had sat for 20 years, small, gray, 2 windows facing the mountains, a porch with 2 rocking chairs that had not held 2 people since the year my father had bought it. Bridget was waiting on the porch with 2 coffees in paper cups. Wilhelmina. Bridget. She handed me a cup. We sat. We did not speak for 10 minutes. The Blue Ridge sat in front of us in winter colors. Silver, lavender, the deep blue-gray that only happened in late January when the light came in low. I said finally, he could have just told me. Once. He tried 12 times. She intercepted every letter. He was not a man who believed in twisting your arm. He waited for the proof to be airtight. And then he made sure it would land somewhere you could not unsee it. And he gave me Bridget. He gave you Bridget. She reached into her bag. She took out one last envelope. Slim, cream-colored, sealed in wax. She set it on the small table between our chairs. He said to give you this on the day you changed your name. I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet. Filed articles of incorporation for the Theodora Halverson Foundation, a 501c3 registered in North Carolina, focused on postpartum care and crisis support for new mothers in Western North Carolina. The first page named Wilhelmina Halverson as executive director. The second page was a check from T. Halverson Capital LP, made out to the foundation, for $1 million. The memo line, in my father's handwriting, for Thea. I signed both pages. I drove back down the mountain in my father's 2008 Camry. I had kept it. I had not bought the Porsche I could afford. I would not buy it. I would drive his Camry until the transmission gave out, and then I would buy another Camry. At the bottom of the mountain, at the stoplight where Town Mountain Road meets Charlotte Street, I opened the glove box to find a tissue. Inside the glove box was a folded parking pass. I unfolded it. Asheville Botanical Garden, September 4th, 1999. Time stamped, in blue ink, 2:14 p.m. The day my father had seen me for the first time as a toddler across the playground, in the arms of the woman who had stolen me. The day he had begun the 26-year process of getting me back. The light turned green. I drove. He won, finally, posthumously. I won, finally, fully. And the woman who had spent 28 years telling me that my father was a man who could not handle his gifts is sleeping tonight in the same county lockup he was thrown into 26 years ago, when she had him arrested for harassing his own daughter. She is no longer my mother. He was always my father.